Good morning. I want to begin this morning by expressing my deepest gratitude to President Biden for his extraordinary leadership and unwavering service to this great nation. The President's decision to entrust our nation's future to a new generation is a testament to his selfless patriotism, to his commitment to our democratic principles, and his dedication to the American people. As we navigate this truly unprecedented moment in American history, we will draw strength from his legacy and the foundations he laid in over 5 decades of public service to this country. In the days and weeks ahead, we will appropriately honor President Biden's many accomplishments. However, today, I believe it's most prudent to turn our attention to the future and decide on the future we want for our nation and for our families. And I believe this future starts with Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee for president. She is proven, prepared, and ready to move America forward. Alongside President Biden, Kamala helped to guide our nation through an unprecedented global pandemic, revitalize our economy, and create millions of new jobs, reinforce our democratic institutions, and renew our global reputation. Kamala also understands the work is far from over, and we have much, much more to do. Most importantly, Kamala understands that our nation's future will only be as strong as our commitment to safeguarding and defending our democracy. My work in Congress as the top Democrat on the committee with jurisdiction focuses on strengthening the guardrails that protect our democratic systems. Only with a strong Democrat in the White House will we be able to advance our work to expand voting rights, overhaul our campaign finance system, and end extreme partisan gerrymandering. As President Biden said in his inaugural address, our democracy is both precious and fragile. Electing Kamala Harris is the best opportunity to ensure that it flourishes well into the future. So I'm proud to endorse Kamala Harris, look forward to working alongside her to make our democracy fairer, stronger, and more inclusive. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
I wanted to ask you if you know any more information about what transpired over the weekend in regards to President Biden's decision. And there was a letter, but there wasn't much more information. Was he asked to step aside? Was he not feeling? Was it because of poll numbers? Was he not feeling well? Do you have any other information?
Well, I think we'll learn more in the days ahead, and I know that he's poised to speak to the nation in the next several days. I think this was, frankly, a decision that he and his family reached, his inner circle reached, after weeks of conversations with Democrats, clearly a number of people in the House and in the Senate, and people who are intimately involved in the Democratic Party and its process, expressed real concerns about his ability to govern and campaign, and about whether or not he could make the case to the American public that he could serve for another 4 years. When you elect a president, you're electing them for the duration of a term. And I think over time, the concerns that people expressed led him to conclude that putting the nation's interest, which is extraordinary because this is really hard to do, I think that's what brought him to this moment. And honestly, you think about the power of the presidency. I mean, George Washington set an amazing precedent back when he decided 2 terms was going to be his time and he was going to literally give up power. It wasn't power like it is today, clearly, but he walked away from it, went back home. And that set the standard. I think that was in America's interest. I think what Joe Biden did yesterday is, again, putting the country before himself, walking away from the most powerful job in the world, and I think that was, in the American interest. I also contrast that with the former president, who, after losing an election, put himself over the party's interest and tried to seize power with an election that had been lost. And so I think those are stark differences between what we saw in President Biden yesterday and what we saw from former President Trump 3.5 years ago.
On that same note, there are calls for President Biden essentially to step down now. If those are the reasons, his ability to lead at least for another 4 years, is he able to lead for the remainder of his presidency? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. I mean, I've been with the president a number of times. I was on a Zoom meeting with him a couple days, and people were talking about the campaign. That's clear. He still has his faculties I think concerns were about the next 4 years, but clearly he can continue to lead. He also will be able to do this now without the rigors of a campaign, which a national campaign puts extraordinary pressure on an individual. He'll be able to focus now on transitioning to the next administration. And honestly, this is another indication. Where President Biden put the country first yesterday, what do Republicans do? Instead of just suggesting that they appreciate his service to the country, they immediately start attacking for political purposes and to try to gain a political advantage. I think most Americans will find that offensive. He clearly, whether he can perform well enough, and look, politics and campaigns are performance to some degree. Perhaps never his strength, but governing is, and he has done an amazing job in the last 3.5 years, and I have every confidence he can finish out the rest of his term.
Joe, how does the system work now?
It's a great question, Berkeley. We have a convention coming up in August, and right now in conversations like the one we're having across the country, people will make judgments about who they think should take up the mantle. But this is without precedent. We have not been here before, certainly in the modern world, when primaries began happening. The president releases his delegates, and now delegates will make decisions when we get to Chicago on who they want to support. I do think the president's endorsement of the vice president, I think a lot of endorsements from members of the House and Senate, state party leaders. I think we will conclude this quickly, but it'll be a convention, an open convention, the first one we've had since the 1950s.
Congressman, to that point, can you talk about, some Republicans are speaking out about the electoral process and how 14 million voters did cast their ballot for Biden. What are your thoughts on that?
They did, and the president made the decision yesterday to step away from the race and to release those delegates. Again, this is the Republicans messing around, trying to create any kinds of political advantages that they can have. They should, in my mind, be quiet. I mean, this is not their business. Who the Democratic Party nominee is, the decision that Democrats across the country, through their elected delegates, will make that decision. And the president came to the conclusion that after weighing all the evidence, he didn't feel going forward was in the interest of the American public. So he did what he needed to do, and now the party, which has a structure, we have rules, we'll go through a process.
Joe, are you a superdelegate?
I am.
Okay. So
Every member of the House.
every member of the
Yeah,
House? Okay.
yeah.
So where does that leave you next month in Chicago if there's some contested race?
Well, as we work through the next few weeks, the party leadership and figuring out exactly what we'll need to change in terms of the convention, I'm going to continue to be a voice to argue for the vice president, as I've said today. I'm going to continue to work with the local delegates, our county chair and our elected delegates to try to encourage them to support the vice president. We'll go through a process. The delegates that are, I don't think they call them super delegates anymore, and I apologize, Berkeley, that's how I refer to them, but I think there's a different name. It's not at all clear that we'll vote on the first ballot anyway. There's some consideration as the Rules Committee is finalizing the rules for the convention. But it's certainly clear that members of Congress have influence with their local delegates. I think it's a significant number of House members have already endorsed the vice president. I think we'll encourage our delegates to support her. Look, this is now a sprint to Election Day. I mean, 3.5 months in a presidential campaign is the blink of an eye. I mean, usually Americans, they may not want to be subjected to 2 years plus of campaigning, but that's usually what they're subjected to. So this is now literally a sprint to the finish. So that's why I think people feel she's tested, she's prepared, she's ready, she's done it all. That's why we need to rally around her and get on with the campaign.
I know this has been kind of a fast-moving situation. Had anyone else reached out to you to try and get your endorsement? Were there any other candidates?
No. I know that other people's names have been put in terms of speculation, but no one has reached out to me, and I've made it clear for weeks that if the president stepped away in private conversations, that I would be strongly supporting the vice president.
Joe, did you ever communicate with the president either in a letter or a phone call or text message about what you wanted or wished he did?
No, I think most of the comments that have been attributed to me publicly, nationally, really came from a private conversation I had with a small group of colleagues and Minority Leader Jeffries just a few weeks ago. They were widely reported. Someone leaked that confidential conversation, which I really haven't commented on. I was in a Zoom session with the president last week where members expressed concerns. So I think he got the sense of what people were fearful of and made the right choice.
Did you speak up at that Zoom conference at all?
I certainly spoke in the conference. I don't really talk about what's communicated in private conversations where I'm asked for my opinion in a confidential room, so I'm not going to comment on it. But
what did you tell the president in that Zoom meeting?
I was largely listening at that point, but I think it got communicated to the president through Minority Leader Jeffries what his committee, we call our ranking Democrats will be committee chairs if we win the House. So the top Democrats on the standing committees met with with Leader Jeffries. He communicated to the president on our behalf what the consensus was.
Can I follow up on what Jackie was saying? There are some questions from some people about how democratic this process has been. I mean, there were no other candidates in the primary. Voters weren't given another choice, and now.
Well, that's not true. There was a primary process. There were other candidates. People selected President Biden to be renominated. So, number one, there was a process. People who wanted to run for president could have, and some did avail themselves of the primary. He won them all. The democratic process is where we all participate in electing delegates. He chose, which is why I said throughout the last 2 weeks, if people have asked me, this is a decision the president has to come to. There may be people urging him to do something, but he had the delegates pledged to him, and he had to make the decision on continuing the race. He chose ultimately, in the interest of the country, in the interest of the Democratic Party, not to do that, not to proceed. So now we have a process where we now, with the person who won the nomination or would have won the nomination, has decided to step back. Now we have rules that will allow us to move forward and select another candidate.
So she doesn't.
And we can't go back in time. I mean,
Right.
The problem is, and I think people within the party were largely unaware of some of the challenges the president had, became pretty evident in that debate. And I think that's what really set people. I think had that happened 6 months ago, 8 months ago, we would have had a different outcome. But look, we are where we are, and there's no going back. As far as we know, in this universe, time only works in one direction. So you deal with what you have in the moment in which you have it.
So Kamala Harris is not nominated yet.
Correct.
Could there be now, I mean, there is discussion that potentially there could be some other candidates. I know Berkeley asked about the process.
Yeah.
What happens if there are some other people?
So if other people chose to run, they could certainly announce, and then they would communicate with the delegates who have been selected. So it doesn't change the delegates. The delegates were selected through the primary process. Many of them, if not almost all, were pledged to support President Biden, and that's the way this works. You vote for the candidate and the delegates. So the delegates were selected, and it varies from state to state. But those delegates now are selected and have been chosen. They will go to Chicago. We'll have a roll call. We may have one even earlier than the actual physical gathering because the state of Ohio has raised questions about whether or not, if we nominate someone in late August, whether they'll actually put them on the ballot. I mean, you'd really have to question what Ohio's thinking. So we may have to do a virtual ballot. But the delegates will choose whoever the nominee is. That would have happened whether it was President Biden or Vice President Harris or someone else. So if there are other people who are considering it right now, they're making those decisions, and they will then have to reach out to delegates and try to persuade them that they, rather than the vice president, should be the nominee.
How united do you think the Democratic Party is right now behind Kamala? Not everybody is obviously endorsed her. Many have over the last couple of days come forward, but not everyone.
Yeah, I think the decision the president made is less than 24 hours old, so this has been really a real shift. Yesterday, I put out a statement thanking President Biden for his service and didn't want to comment on the next phase and give him the day to basically, be honored by the people who have served with him and people around the country. That's happened, and now people, I think, will be turning towards the next phase, because frankly, we just don't have a lot of time. So this is, as I say to people, unprecedented. And it's pretty historic. You're not going to see something like this happen probably in the balance of our lifetime, certainly not my lifetime, I hope. And this isn't how we would have wanted it, but I think this is the best for the American public, and that's what we always need to be focused on.
Didn't see this one coming.
I don't think anybody, I will say when I watched the debate, I was in Washington in my apartment, and I felt 30 seconds into it that something was wrong. Then coming home over the 4th of July weekend, you hear from people at public events. I'm at a lot of public events, and people would pull me aside. Many people who had enormous respect, admiration, affection for Joe Biden, saying, we need to change who the candidate is. And a lot of that grew out of fear of Donald Trump. He continues to deny that he lost the 2020 election, continues to accept no responsibility or blame for what happened on January 6, 2021. He has continued to spin. The other thing about the debate was not only the president's performance, but that the former president lied basically for 90 straight minutes and made up these fantasies about what had happened in the past. So now we'll have, a campaign worthy of the American public, and I'm grateful for that. Terrific. Hey, thanks all for being here this morning.
Thank you, Joe.